happen. And just because you fail at one show doesn't mean you're going to fail at all the other shows. You never know. Don't never give up on the first one or the second one. You got to keep going.
I think networking is an often misunderstood term. People think networking is manipulating other people. It's getting really, really good and then meeting people who need that skill that you are really good at.
If you're only here to sell or to make money, you don't understand, or you're losing an opportunity.
What makes you what you are is you get back up and you keep trying. How stubborn are you? It has to be something you enjoy doing.
It sounds very cliched. People can tell when you're not excited about your work, but they can.
Hey guys, this is part 2 of my interviews I did at San Diego Comic-Con asking people for their advice on how to start selling art at conventions. In this one, I talked to Steven Silver, Erik Gist, Don Julio, Kaveh Taherian, and Philip Tan about their advice and insights on standing out and learning from each experience. All of them have pretty modest starts and stories where they might have experienced quite a bit of trial and error at first. According to them, most of it is doing the work and trying your best. By the way, if you want to support me, check out the links to the courses below. All of this content is sponsored by me, so your support really does help me make more content like this. Thanks, and enjoy the episode.
Or how do you determine when you're good enough to start selling your work, especially at something like convention?
I think it's always important just to go out and see what people are actually doing. That's the first thing. It's almost just like checking out your competition, I think, is a great way just to start building up that motivation. And sometimes I think you take that leap of faith just by showing up at Artist Alley, doing an Artist Alley where it might not cost you as much money to actually show up at that table. And you put the stuff out there and you see how people react to it. And you just got to just do it. You know, that's what it comes down to.
Well, and if somebody's going and doing the things that they're being told to do, but they're not quite getting the reception, or what do you recommend they do or change in the process of it?
Is when you're going to conventions, what you're doing is just seeing what's selling, what's not selling. You know, like something that I discovered was just by walking around the cons, I started to see, wow, more and more people are selling stickers. Why is that? More and more people are maybe selling like little vinyl, or they're selling those acrylic standees, and I see things like that. And you know what you can afford and what you can't afford when you're just kind of getting into it, and you just got to determine, am I willing to set aside a certain amount of money, right, that you're willing to try a new product. But it's all testing the market. I think it's the same thing for me with Instagram. It's a test. You try, put stuff out there and see how people react to it. That's the most important thing.
Are there certain conventions that you go to that do better with, let's say prints than others?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they'll be like, I would say, like even coming to San Diego Comic-Con, I do way better, sell way more prints than I do books. And then I do a show like Lightbox Expo, and I'm just selling just mainly books the whole time. And that's again another test why you want to go to more conventions when you can, because then you get to discover, you know what, I sell more of this product at one, less of it at another. It's one big test. Yeah. And I mean, that's really what it is. You're testing it because you're going to see, people are going to tell you, well, they're not buying it, right? That's the indication right there. If they're picking it up, and that's the sign, and you got to pay attention to that. Yeah. And one of my biggest things is don't wait for I always say, to stop showing your artwork to your parents and everything else, because they're always going to tell you how great everything is. You just really got to get the professional's opinion, come out, show up, and that's what's more important than anything.
Well, how do you deal with failure? Because I think a big part of the convention experience is failure.
So for me, it's all about surrender. You kind of like surrender to it, because we're going to fail. We're always going to fail, and I think there's all that. Doing caricature, for me, when I first started doing caricature, was one of the greatest ways to deal with failure, because I had so many people reject my caricatures, but it just made me stronger, and I started to realize what I needed to change and do. What else? And I don't believe in failure. I just don't. I just think, hey, we're going to fail. So what? You're going to get rejected. So what? You're going to get ghosted. So what? You just keep going and stop suffering in your imagination. There's a quote by this philosopher Seneca. He said, we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. And I think this is what stops most people from doing things. We start to, oh my God, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if that goes wrong? Hey, it's going to go wrong. things are not going to work out great, and you just got to keep on moving forward. And then, like you're mentioning, every show is going to be different, and just because you fail at one show doesn't mean you're going to fail at all the other shows. You never know, and that's why you want to honestly do as many shows as possible to test that and then see. But don't never give up on the first one or the second one. You got to keep going.
Did you have any like golden rules of convention booth design or anything like that? Like something you recommend everybody getting into conventions try? Or
well, I think honestly, beyond just having something that's easy to read, just a big banner, not too much clutter and everything, but more importantly, you got to stand up and talk to people. You cannot sit at a convention behind a booth with your arms crossed or looking down at your drawing the whole time. That's the worst thing you can do. I think you got to just make sure that you're personable, you're talking to people, you're answering questions, and you got a smile on your face. And that's really the most important thing to be prepared for when coming to conventions, where I think people, if they're just sitting and not interacting, that's when you're doing it wrong.
How do you feel like you're good enough to start selling your artwork?
One is, if you keep working at an idea of some sort, eventually you reach a point where it burns in you so much that you're like, I'm just going to make it as good as I can, but the idea is so important to me that I have to share it with people. Otherwise, I feel like I'm going to die. I think I talked about this when I was on your show before. Other than that, you also just, if you see a lot of shows, if you go to a lot of conventions and you meet a lot of people, generally speaking, everyone's very supportive and they're very cool and they're very nice, and the people are really encouraging of you to follow through. And they're like, you could do it. Like, the nice people will show you like, oh, just do it this way, you can try this, or don't worry about this. Like, they'll guide you a little bit, and it helps open it up and make it more of an attainable goal.
Yeah.
So, truthfully, I'm always like, I don't know if it's good enough to be here, or I don't know if I'm good enough, but you kind of just have to like shut it down and just do the best you can and hope that it works out.
Well, and for everyone I've talked to, they pretty much said the same thing. Just start and don't be afraid, because
yes, easier said than done, of course.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, and if people think that their niche idea or their niche thing that they're interested in will even have an audience and stuff, which might be the case, but the only way to find out is by putting stuff out there.
You don't know.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that the goals that you're setting for it are like very reasonable and they're very clear. If you're going to be like, I'm going to do a convention and I'm going to be like a millionaire after the end of the first day, then this is not for you. Right. But you have to be clear about what it is that you want. You're like, if I can make my money back and make $1, I'm a success. Again, easier said than done. I don't always follow that advice myself. It's a little bit hard, but more or less that's what you're trying to do.
They set goals that are attainable and not so ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, for every success story I've heard at a convention, there's always these daily, like they also have the equivalent story of like, oh, I am successful now, but when I was starting out, no one would even walk by my booth at all.
It's
no
true.
one cares.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's part of it to the convention experience.
Yes. It teaches you, it toughens you up in a lot of ways. Yeah. As I talked about when I was on your show, like a lot of my books are originals and they're different stuff that people won't necessarily are not familiar with. So I have to just sit there one person at a time. Hey, here's my story. This is about this. This is the book. Try your best to connect with them and getting them interested in it and showing it to them and, sort of getting it one fan at a time, if you will, as opposed to something that people are already familiar with who might just like be like, oh, okay, I know that character. That's something I like. So it's actually a lot harder than doing original stuff.
Man, I've heard people saying, if you have the choice between the thing that's more lucrative and the thing that they have more inherent interest in, always go with the thing that you have more inherent interest in.
Yeah, I agree, because you're going to push it further. You're going to work on it harder. You're going to like give it that much more love because you're not doing it for any specific like financial reason.
Yeah.
You're still doing it to sort of scratch that itch that exists within you.
Well, on top of that, I mean, it's like there's the art you're creating and then the art you have to make money. How do you meld the two to like compromise a little bit to where you're making a product that people can buy, but also making something that you're in love with?
I mean, that in and of itself is the fun creative problem. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, your job is to come up with creative solutions to problems, whether it's like a story that you want to tell or a drawing that you want to make. So, I mean, I can give you specific examples of stuff that I've done, but like, so the Mothman book that I did, that was my first effort to, whoa, Hall H just got real loud.
So some world shaking in it.
Yeah. Something. But the idea was to take something that maybe something a little bit more broadly familiar that people would know, like cryptids. But then I thought, I'm going to go as specific as I can. And so I made this whole book that's just making fun of every different little pocket neighborhood within Los Angeles.
Right.
And then I got to really get creative with it and make up my own cryptids that exist within those spaces. So it was like I got to do sort of a satirical thing. I got to have fun with the drawings. I got to come up with stuff that nobody else had done because nobody thought to do something that specific and weird. And it's been a very big hit. So I've had a lot of interest from people just based on that.
Well, and it seems like you almost don't know what you like when you first start.
That's true.
You're gonna have to figure it out as you go.
Yeah, you find your voice like the more you do it. I mean, I think I was lucky in the sense that when I first started doing it, I realized that it was always going to be a little bit more comedic, a little bit more satirical, a little bit more like wacky.
Yeah.
So I've just kept doubling down on that and going further and further and further, but making sure that it has some sort of like a clear intent. And, either an emotional arc or like a story arc or a satirical arc.
In terms of like pricing, figuring out what to sell things for, do you have any thoughts or advice?
I mean, especially in Artist Alley, we all try to hype each other up and be like, you're underselling it and you got to make sure that you're going for more. So whatever you think you're wanting it to sell it for, you should probably be selling it for more. That being said, going to conventions is a great idea because you can sort of see and get a sense of the landscape of what other people are pricing at, and then make a very honest assessment of how much your work is up to that standard or not, and then sort of go from there. But really it depends on what the medium is, what the quality of the work is, what the size of it is. There's not really like one size fits all. You never know. People will pay, they'll get really excited and they'll pay way more than you ever even thought they would. But it's important to not undervalue yourself. And the thing is that makes it so tricky is that we're all people who will do this for free anyway. So anybody giving you any money on some level is like, oh my God, that's so cool. But you got to pay rent. Yeah. You got to pay for your table. You got to pay for all your expenses. So you got to be smart about it and make sure that you don't come out and lose money from it if you can.
Did you have any golden rules of convention design or booth making that you'd recommend to anybody getting into this stuff?
Oh man, it's tough. I gotta say, every convention that I do, I'm always like, is this booth correctly designed? I never feel like I settle on one perfect thing. I think it ends up changing based on what the kind of show is. I'll also say too, within every convention, I'll end up shifting stuff around because depending on where you're placed or depending on what the crowd is, some people might notice one thing at one convention, but they won't notice it in that same spot at another convention. So be malleable and make sure that you have stuff that looks as professional as it can. And stacking in different levels is also something that's very helpful to have. And really, like I said, there's no one size fits all. You got to just be willing to adjust as needed. Don't give up. Even in one day, you might just be like, nobody's looking at this, I'm going to switch it all around, and then you test it until you find the best possible way.
Figuring stuff out and expecting that you'll fail 95% of it.
100%. Just most of what you'll do is fail.
Yeah.
Again, I think I said that on the last time I was with you. Yeah.
Real life.
I'm just a professional failure. That's what I always tell everybody.
Yeah. Everybody says the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All you do is fail, mess up. What makes you what you are is, do you get back up? Do you keep trying? How stubborn are you?
Yeah.
People say it's about achieving the goal. For me, it's I just get stubborn and I dig my heels and I'm no, I'm going to try harder. Yeah, I'm right. I got to do this. So if you got that, you'll be okay.
Well, it's cool, man. I think I have enough for this interview. Do you have any final thoughts or words of encouragement for people?
I think we just did a panel today that you were kind enough to come to a little bit. It was talking about the importance of community. And I think one of the wonderful things about conventions is that you get to run into old friends, make new ones, you get inspired by other people. I think we were all in a paradigm where we were online for so long, especially after COVID. And if you're able to and if you're comfortable, it's just beautiful and wonderful to come out and meet other people and see what they're doing. And it just gives you energy, even though it's tiring. You're going to come away from it and have more ideas, more excitement. You're going to come up with something that you didn't even think that you were going to come up with before. So as much as you can, meet up with friends, see them, look at what they're doing, ask how you can help others. Just spread the love, you know what I mean? I think that's the best thing that you can do at this point. Yeah.
Thanks so much, man.
Hey, man, it was lovely to see you as always.
What thoughts or advice would you recommend to people either wanting to get into this stuff or wanting to get better at it?
Important to study other people's processes, understanding your own brand. So you may not be doing work of the same kind across your own catalog, but presentation is really important. But always look around and get to know your neighbors. So then, past getting to know them as a colleague and friend, you can understand understand maybe some workarounds that they've gotten through or figured out. A lot of my processes are experimental, so every day that I'm here, I also try something different with the table. I don't think you should be stuck on one thing unless it's really hard to put together.
I'll remind them.
Mine is pretty modular, so I'm trying something new every single day.
Did you know you wanted to sell? Were you doing superhero stuff? Was it just kind of like out the gate you knew what you wanted, or was there like a degree of experimentation with it?
There was a great deal of experimentation because it wasn't a hard decision to be like, okay, I'm going to be a con. I'm going to sell at conventions. Yeah, the enterprise of selling at the convention was a sort of personal challenge myself. It wasn't my primary income. So just starting out, as long as you have a catalog of work that you can put up, you should go do it. Just make sure that you have plenty to show.
I think that often the scariest part is the rejection, but it's actually most of the whole endeavor of trying to do this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Developing a thick skin, being able to put on armor for the kind of feedback that will affect you negatively. Yeah, it's important to have people pass your table and not be interested. I think that's a really important aspect to understand, acknowledge, and accept as part of the process.
Do you have any advice for anyone trying to practice that?
Wait a second. Set up your table at home. And have people come look at it. Give you actually rapid fire first impressions, rapid fire effectiveness of your presentation. But maybe not people who are big cheerleaders of your work. Maybe someone who isn't into art, just as more fresh eyes. No spouses, no parents, nothing like that. Kids are good. Kids are honest. I did say have plenty to show, but I run on the busy side in terms of what I have. So it really depends on the kind of artist you are. Right now, since I'm experimental with a lot of my work, I have more out just because I want to see where people's eyes go. So, and I think one last piece is if you're okay going into the red to try new things, then I think it's a good first approach. Coming to a convention. If you're only here to sell, then or to make money, I think you're losing. I think you don't understand, or you're losing an opportunity.
It seems like a big reason to come to conventions is the social element. I'm sure you've made really close friends coming to these things that have made it totally worth it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's another level. Is you get to. Well, you have good and bad neighbors, let's be real. So the good neighbors are the ones that make this experience a social one, and that's the fuel you need to get through a weekend like this, especially San Diego and New York, the big ones.
How do you deal with pricing? How do you know how to price your stuff? Is it just based off the people around you, or is it more of responding to what people are willing to buy?
Responding to what people. Well, I do digital print, so all of mine are the exact same price, right? But I do study a lot of people's price points. Yes, selling the same thing, right? And there's a happy medium in there. But if your work is, if you're published, then you can, the caliber of the pricing goes a little bit higher, or whatever you can command more. No. If you price too low, you're devaluing not only your work, but you're devaluing the work that is around you. So we have to keep the integrity and dignity of the practice. It depends on the artist too. I'm an introvert. But I come here to connect. I stand up a lot. I love talking to the people, even though it takes up a lot of energy for me personally, and I know that's true for a lot of people. Personally, if I see an artist just kind of back there and hidden and working on something intensely, besides being able to look over at what they're doing, generally for me, I feel like they're sort of inaccessible, and I think that connection is really important in the process of speaking for your art or even selling your art. So when you come to convention, tap into some ways to engage that are maybe outside of your comfort zone.
How do you go from being in something like a life drawing class to selling a print or selling a comic book cover or anything like that?
I could give my input on that, but it was never really my mindset, and it probably should have been a little bit more, but it wasn't. My whole goal was to develop my skills to a professional level. And then my theory was always, if I get my skills to a high enough level where it looks like I'm a professional, and I show it to enough people, one of them is going to end up assuming I'm a professional, and they will treat me like a professional, and they will hire me like a professional. And that's how you get your first work. As far as this sort of secondary and tertiary incomes, there's always a real wax and wane to that because it constantly changes. I don't think there's one right way to do that. Like right now, prints are really popular. There was a few years ago, you couldn't really hardly sell a print. They just weren't very popular. So yeah, like right now, the comic exclusive thing, for the last decade or so has been really popular. Before, that wasn't even really a thing. There was a time that the enamel pen stuff was really popular. So part of it is just doing your research and making sure that you have a market, make sure there's a market for what it is that you're doing. And don't necessarily chase that market, but try to find your way of appeasing it. So whatever it is that you enjoy doing, find a market where that's popular and do a little bit of research. How do the people who are doing well, what are they selling? Where are the trends right now? What's popular right now? And gearing your resources towards that rather than necessarily just going, I'm just going to make a bunch of prints and go out there and put them in people's faces, because that's not going to be successful. So it's running a business, really. It's not really particular or unique to being a freelance artist. It's just being a good business person and doing research and researching your market and finding where the trends are and finding your little niche within that market, I guess.
You're doing things here at this convention where you're like, I never thought I'd be doing this exact thing and this exact...
No, not. I mean, I guess maybe I kind of dreamed and hoped. But yeah, there's always an element, and that's what I mean by the changing marketplace. What it drives Comic-Con now is different than as far as for the small vendor, what drives Comic-Con is different than what drove it 10 years ago, which is different than what drove it 20 years ago. It's constantly changing, and you need to keep an eye on that and not get left behind. But as long as you have a good skill base, it's easy to, which goes back to the life drawing and the traditional education, you can always shift gears and move into a different slot if you've got those skills. But if too much of your skills are overly specific, like I can do this one thing and that's all I can do, even if I'm really, really good at it, eventually that market is going to go away because you're going to have, ideally, a 40, 50, 60-year career, ideally. And over the course of 40, 50, 60 years, you don't really understand how much things change. And so what's popular now isn't going to be popular in 10 years, isn't going to be popular in 20 years. So you need that good, strong foundation that can shift with the trends to a certain degree. Again, you don't want to chase trends, but you want to be able to shift a little bit.
How do you balance the training as an artist and finding business opportunities that will make it sustainable?
I don't have an answer for that. I mean, as far as training as an artist, part of my income and part of my reputation and part of my artistry is teaching. And so I get to kind of learn on the job, or at least maintain on the job. As I'm teaching things, fundamentals to people, I'm constantly reinforcing fundamentals in myself. So that part isn't real hard to me. It's starting to become more of a thing as I teach a little bit less. But as far as adapting that to making money, which is I think is what the question was, I guess I always just trusted if I get good enough, people will recognize that and they will want to make money off of me. And if people want to make money off of me, they're going to have to give me some of that money. But I'm not a builder. I'm not someone who goes out and builds a business. I would rather find someone, which is what my rep Trinity does, Matt Saltzman. That's what he does. And so I've sort of attached myself to him and he's attached himself to me, and we use each other's skills in a symbiotic way. Not taking advantage of each other, but becoming a sort of more total person between the two of, which is the world I want to live in. Not necessarily aggrandizing one skill set over another skill set, but letting them all work together in harmony so that everyone does well. Maybe that's a dream, but it's worked well to me. That I find someone that I trust that has a skill set that I do not have. And that's usually what I'm looking for. So I guess that's your answer. I don't do it myself. I find someone that I trust who is good at it. So those two things, someone who's good at that thing and someone that I trust, I might make a little less money doing it that way. Or I might take a smaller piece of the pie doing it that way. But ideally, if we both work together well, that we're going to make more than twice what either one of us would on our own, and we actually end up making more money. That was always the biggest thing. I was fearless when it came to showing my work to people. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing. Get really, really good and then show your work to anyone that'll look at it. Yeah. Because you're going to find connections. You don't have to network. I mean, I think networking is an often misunderstood term. People think networking is manipulating other people or convincing people of something or talking someone into doing something or creating a facade. It's not. It's getting really, really good and then meeting people who need that skill that you are really good at. And then you work together, hopefully. Yeah. That's networking. Yeah. Networking is that you provide a service, they provide a service or a skill set, and you all do well together. It's not, hey, I'm a mover and shaker, and I'm a this and I'm a that. It's like, no, that's not what it is, because eventually that's going to fall apart. Eventually people are going to see through the facade. And what you would rather is that they underestimate you. They say, oh, I'm going to give this guy a chance, and I'm going to hope that it really pays off. And then when you actually start working, you're even better than they thought you were. Yeah. And not the other way around. Not, hey, this guy's a really, really gifted young artist. I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna use him. And then you turn out to not be that good, and everyone's disappointed. Yeah. No, it's saying, what's the saying? Under promise and over deliver. I think that's a better way to go.
Yeah. Well, I think the way you achieve that is just by being really excellent at the thing you're doing. And
absolutely,
like we were talking about with figure drawing.
Absolutely.
You found a way to get paid to practice, which I think is essentially that's what everyone is doing here. Like I'm sure David or like Peter, like anyone would agree. We're just trying to keep doing it to get better, to hopefully have more opportunity.
And again, that wasn't anything that I necessarily pursued. Yeah. I literally just showed up. I showed up and I showed up and I showed up and I kept working hard and kept working hard. And eventually Jeff Watts recognized that in me and again, saw a skill set in me that he could utilize. And I saw a skill set in him as the owner of the business and being a really good artist. I saw a skill set in him that I could utilize. And we worked together to, build the school even bigger. He had done a great job building it. I came in and I added another facet to it and it got bigger. Yeah. Then, someone else comes in, his wife, Krista, comes in and helps run things behind the scenes, makes it even bigger. And it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's like Voltron, right? Yeah. Like each piece comes together to make it stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And you're able to do things together that none of you could do on your own. Yeah. And I know I keep reiterating that point, but that's what it is. Trying to do things on your own, you can do it, but it's really, really hard.
Yeah. When I hear people talking about trying to get like the right connection, like the right meeting or something, but ultimately, like a lot of that stuff can be done at home. Like you are from San Diego, you just went to a local art school and just committed yourself to it.
Right.
And I think a lot of people want that sort of environment where they can build something over time. Yeah. And that could be done in their city of Nebraska or something, But
it's also not being overly finicky. So sometimes when people want to make the right connection, they want to do it in too much of a direct line. It's not. It's more like a shotgun. It's like, man, throw out as many as you can, and the more stuff you hit, eventually one of them is going to work out. But if you're trying to go in a straight line too much, you might miss opportunities because you've got too much tunnel vision trying to go for that one person. But if you're going in and you come to Comic-Con and you talk to 50 different people, the odds of one of them connecting with you on a personal level and having a skill set that you can use on a professional level goes up immensely. But if you come here and you're like, I only want to talk to the editor-in-chief at Marvel Comics, the odds of you even getting that meeting are phenomenal. And then the odds of that meeting actually playing into something are even less. Yeah. You're giving yourself one shot. And it's a great shot if you get it, but you're hamstringing yourself. Yeah. So go and talk to literally, don't even care. If someone says, hey, are you an artist? Go, yeah, you want to see my work? Yeah. It's like, or if someone says, hey, can I see your work? Don't go, oh, I don't know who this guy is. Yeah. It's like, because you never know who they might be. You never know who they might turn into. I guess you never really know where success is going to come from. Yeah. You have in your idea, in your mind, you have an idea of what success is, but you don't ever really know where it's going to come from or how it's going to play out. Yeah. And it's, in my experience, it's very rarely been what you expected. Most of my best connections, my best opportunities have come from really roundabout ways. Yeah. Really, really roundabout ways.
Yeah. Very strange. And I'm sure things that you never would have expected that are dreams happen as a result of just being yourself and doing what you like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Being sincere and being really good.
Yeah.
Those two things are going to lead you to way more success because people are going to sense that.
No. A lot of artists struggle with jumping from the student phase into the professional phase where they're selling their work. Did you have any thoughts on any of that kind of stuff? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we when I first started, I really just go in and create things that I enjoy, things that I think people will like, and test the waters. And no one will know what's going to be the thing that's going to sell immediately, especially when you're a beginner in the field. You go out there, you test the waters, you put different kind of artworks, themes, different. Of course, most of them should be artworks that makes you happy. You enjoy drawing them, but you really have to do it by trial and error.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a shortcut around it. I mean, it will help if you have an art rep that will, either go out who's already have experience handling other artists, handling other beginner artists and professional artists. They would know how to, because this is a weird field where most of your artwork you would only know when it comes down to how many people is willing to bid on your artwork. And I don't think there's any other way around it. You put your artwork out there. All you need is two person who likes it enough to fight against each other. And again, I mean, if your artwork is not up there yet, you're not gonna have people fighting for it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of beginners are always looking for either shortcuts or maybe some kind of quote-unquote secret technique to be able to jump over and then immediately sell things, like a lot of the a lot of people who's already established their name. But when you're starting, you really just have to put your work out there, trial and error.
At this point, far into your career, being someone who's successful at conventions, would you say that you're still doing a lot of the same things?
Absolutely.
At the beginning?
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm doing exactly, the same thing I'm doing in the beginning. Obviously, at this point, you would already have, ideas of things in your art that people like, and you work from there. And one thing you always have to know is how much artworks are in the market. Like if your platform is like eBay, just basic simple example, if your platform is eBay, then you can easily go in and say how many Wolverine artworks are being sold for any given week. And you would know that, okay, there's a gazillion of those out there. Maybe having mine on it, especially if I'm beginning. If I'm a beginner, then that might be an issue. Now, but if I'm someone established and I know that there's a gazillion people who want my work and just waiting to have the chance to buy it, then that doesn't matter.
The thing that people keep talking about is you almost don't know what you like and also what people want from you, So a lot of it is just going and experimenting and reacting to people's decisions towards your
their decisions, and obviously it has to be something you enjoy doing. I mean, it shows, because that would just comes out in your work. People will know if you're bored or you're not excited doing it. It sounds very cliche to think that people can tell when you're not excited about your work, but they can.